Today's speaker is Mark Guthier, who has served as director of the Wisconsin Union at UW-Madison since 2001. For most of the last decade, the Wisconsin Union has engaged in a progressive and deliberate course of reflection, discovery, and growth. Mark will share highlights from the Wisconsin Union's decade-long journey from the first shovel of dirt to the final ribbon cutting. We look forward to your presentation, Mark, and we have made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund as a way to say thank you. The program is being recorded. If time permits questions, please wait for the audience mics. Thank you. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, President Donna. And I'm glad to be here. I was trying to remember with Jim Ruley the last time I was here, and we're thinking maybe it was a decade ago. So maybe it was right before we started this whole process. We're not quite sure. So let me start with a story about my first visit with then Chancellor John Wiley. So I was interviewing for this job, and at that time I was a staff member at Indiana University, and John had done his undergraduate work at Indiana University, and he had been there recently and had seen that the union there had recently come out of a 4 or 5 year renovation and had been restored. And so in our interview, he says to me, "So do you think that's something we could do here at UW-Madison? And what are you going to say in an interview?" Right? So you say yes, right? "Oh yes, we could do that." Then I get to campus after being offered the job. The IU renovation, by the way, they spent $28 million in the mid to late 1990s. And I come to campus and discover that he failed to tell me that there were no plans or timelines for renovation to the union, that it would have to go through the State Building Commission, that there was no money. And so if we wanted to do something like that, we had to do it all ourselves. So that's why this is entitled Our 10-Year Journey, because it took an awful lot of people to make this happen. And many of them are in this room. So as I walked in, there are members of our campaign cabinet here. There are members of the union trustees here. There are current and former staff members here, members of the Directors Advisory Board, members of the university administration. So it really did take an awful lot of us, and not the least of which, and you hear that in the story here, were the students. So, and happy to have both President and Vice President of the union here today too. So, so let's get started. So here's the, where did my clicker go? There it is. All right. All right. So overview of the presentation. So we'll do a brief history and scope of the journey, and then I'll share with you the goals, the design process and principles, our budget and funding sources, how it impacted our ongoing operations. I have some facts and figures of then and now comparisons when we started 10 years ago and where we are now. And then I do have a series of photos that show milestones along the way. So, so let's get started. Brief history and scope of the project actually started a little more than 10 years ago when we did a master plan in 03-04 for the Memorial Union's 75th anniversary. So during that anniversary year, we wanted to talk about the future of the union as much as we talked about its history. And so we commissioned a master plan. And that got us thinking about what was possible on the campus for the union, both at Memorial Union and at Union South. And you see a picture there. Anyone recognize that? That's the old atrium at Union South. Yeah. So, and then by 06, we had a successful student referendum approving $96 per student per semester, which got us started on the fundraising piece of this. We launched then a capital campaign in 07 to match the investment the students were making. You'll see that in the budget slides. And then by 09, we were decommissioning and tearing down the old Union South and opening the new Union South on tax day, April 15th in 2011. And then we moved over. While we were doing the Union South project, we were involved with a whole other set of architects designing the Memorial Union project. Because the referendum that we passed wasn't indexed for inflation. And so it was very important for us to keep moving on this project because we only had that dedicated $96. It wouldn't go up over the years. So we moved right from Union South right into the West Wing of the Memorial Union, did the theater and the Hoofers and craft shop. They closed in 12. 2 years later, they opened again, reopened as Shannon Hall, Outdoor UW, and Wheelhouse Studios. So there was some marketing and rebranding done during that process as well. And then most recently, the last 2 years, we've been through the restoration of the rest of the building and the terrace. So, and then Alumni Park opening just a couple weeks ago. So, which was attached to our project from a construction perspective, but was separate from a fundraising perspective. So, all right. So, goals of the overall project, so people ask me, why did you start down this path? And it wasn't just because John Wiley asked me about it in my interview. There were three things that we were trying to do. One was we had infrastructure improvements that had to be made. We had deterioration in both facilities due to age. There's the old Union South again. There were some things in both facilities that were just obsolete, that we weren't using anymore, that the test of time was not saying that we should continue with those either functions or equipment. And then we had new student expectations, right? So new demands the student body was putting on the actual physical facilities. We had space constraints. The new Union South is 2.5 times the size of the old Union South. We knew we needed larger gathering spaces for the campus. Varsity Hall was something that we knew the campus would use. We actually could have built 2 of those, and we'd have still too much demand. So we just knew we needed large gathering places for the campus, more meeting rooms for the campus. Student programming had changed. We wanted a new movie theater. The Frederick March Play Circle is now a black box theater, as some of you may know if you've been in the new space. But it was our movies location at Memorial Union, and now we have a state-of-the-art movie theater over at Union South. Those types of things the students were asking for. So there were just space constraints. Food service delivery requirements. We wanted to move from a central production kitchen model where everything was kind of shipped up to the restaurants to having the food actually prepared in front of people in each of the restaurant locations. So that took additional space. And adequate production storage. Some of you may remember if you there were times where out on Trip Deck at Memorial Union, we actually had some storage containers out there for tables and chairs to be stored outside the building. So there were things like that, right? We had just run out of space. So, and then mission enhancements. We really wanted to serve the campus better, and we knew we needed to invest in our facilities to make that happen. We also wanted to use this process to re-educate the campus about the importance of student leadership, and you'll see that in the design process, how we did that using the design process to reinforce that. And we also wanted to re-energize our status as a membership organization because we called on all of our union members to help support us in this endeavor. So all of those things together were goals of the project. Design process and principles. So here was our design process. So we annually appointed a new design committee to work with the architects. So every year for 10 years, we had a new design committee that had 9 students on it. 2 alumni, 2 faculty, and 2 staff. So myself and the associate director at the time were the 2 staff members. So we had I had 1 vote in the entire process. So I don't have time to share with you the things I lost on as we went through the process. But the 9 students, 5 came from the union and 4 came from student government. And the design committee was led by a student every year. So we appointed a new student leader of the design committee. So that's the group that the architects had to meet with every 3 weeks when they came to town. And then these were the duties of the design committee. They would also then appoint design advisory groups that would report into them. So at one point, we had a ballroom dance advisory group because the ballroom dance clubs on campus were desperate for more flat floor space. And so they wanted to make sure that their needs were met. And so we appointed an advisory group. They gave us their feedback. That came to the design committee and then on to the architects. And then the design committee made their final recommendations to Union Council, which is already a student governance board for us. So that was the design process. Cumbersome. The architects grew to love the committee structure at UW-Madison. Not really. But we didn't give them any other options. So that's how we did it. So. These were the design principles that we came up with. So there are 8 that guided the entire process. So this Even though we knew the facilities were getting in our way a little bit because of age or size and what I had mentioned before, really this project was about creating the spaces that would draw students to the unions and be the space for their programs and their events, right? The unions at their heart are about the programs that happen there, not about their physical structure. So the buildings, we wanted to be able to say yes to a lot of these or all of these when we're done. Are they people magnets? Do they draw people to them? Do they advance programming? In other words, do the buildings actually facilitate student programming, or do they get in the way of it? Are they timeless and enduring? And this, we knew that was true for Memorial Union. That was our goal in designing the new Union South, because that really went with number 4, green and sustainable. The best way to have a sustainable building is to have one we didn't want to tear down again, right? And so, so we wanted to make sure that the buildings were timeless and enduring, that you wouldn't want to tear them down, and that they're green and sustainable. We set a goal of LEED silver for both buildings. We hit LEED gold for Union South, and we're just now forwarding all the paperwork for the LEED certification for Memorial Union. So the next 4 design principles, the buildings need to be student-focused but welcoming of all. So you need to feel like they were here for the students, but we are a university union. We're not a student center. And so we need to also be welcoming of faculty and staff and union members and community members and alumni, right? So we needed to find that nice balance during the design process. We wanted the buildings, too, to build community for their section of campus, but also be university unions for the entire campus. So you should be able to find, and this went with number 7, complementing each other. You should be able to find unique things in both buildings that draw the entire campus to those facilities. You know, we have a large performing arts center over at Memorial Union called the Shannon Hall of Wisconsin Union Theater. We didn't need to replicate that over at Union South, but at Union South, that's where we put the movie theater and the climbing wall and Varsity Hall, right? So we have unique things in both buildings, but then we have things that you need no matter where you are on the campus. So both buildings have meeting rooms and both buildings have food service and so forth, right? So we didn't want one building to feel like it was supplementary to the other, and that was some of the feedback we had from the old Union South. It never quite felt like a full union, and so that was goal number 7. And then the buildings needed to tell our story. And by our story, we meant the story of the union, the importance of student leadership, the story of the campus, what are the values of the campus, can you feel those when you're in the buildings, and the story of the state of Wisconsin. So you ought to feel that you couldn't just pick these buildings up and put them on some other campus and they'd fit, right? They only fit because they're here on this campus and in Madison. So those are the principles. You may have opinions about whether we met those or not with the design, but that's what we strive to do. Project budget and funding sources. So the 2 lighter colored areas are the Union South total budget, and the 3 darker colored areas are the Memorial Union total budget. And there were 3 funding sources. SEG fees, student fees, added up to about 62% of the budget for us. We had our own operating revenue, so the union dedicated a piece of our own operating revenue over the next 30 years to pay the bonds. So that adds up to about 19-20% of the budget. And then we had a fundraising goal of about $40 million to go out and raise. And so those 3 sources together were the business plan for the project. You'll see there are no state tax dollars in the budget at all. This is all built with student support, private support, and our own revenue sources. So, just about $220 million, so a little bit more than Indiana spent on their union. So not that I was trying to overachieve or anything, but well, I think the next one is ongoing operations. So during this process too, we wanted to ask ourselves, how are we going to be different in operating when we open again in both facilities? So. And we came down to these 4 principles. So these we use to train all employees when they come on to our team, and we're attempt to shift our mentality slightly as we opened after making these major investments in the facilities. So we wanted to have an event-based mentality where every day was an event. So whether you're coming to the union for a meeting with 10 people, or you're coming with 900 for a banquet that's a commencement exercise or something. Both of those should feel like an event because they're an event to you, right? And we should treat them that way. So we wanted to have an event-based mentality. We wanted to honor the guest's perspective. So we are a program revenue unit of the campus. We don't receive any money from the university. And so we need to operate as if customer service matters, right? And you have a choice whether you come to the union and use us. And so we wanted to have a customer first perspective. So we wanted to honor your perspective and not have our operations be built around what was easier for the staff. So we wanted to operate in a green way. So if we spent all this money building green buildings, we needed to operate them in a green way. So that was the fourth. And then build community. We are the community center for the campus. That's our goal, is to build community for the entire campus. But we needed to build community internally. In order for us to be good community builders for the campus, we needed to have a strong staff team internally. So we needed to model that behavior. So those were our 4 operating principles coming out of this process. Oh, now I've turned off. Oh, there we go. Then and now comparisons. So I think I'm doing all right. Here are some facts and figures. So in 06, before we started, you see on the column on the left and then the column on the right. So we've gone from about 400 student staff to 1,400 student staff. It takes a lot to run these 2 facilities. Our operating budget has more than doubled. Our programming has more than doubled. Our room reservations and bookings have more than doubled. You see all that. We actually have 3 buildings now. As much space as we added, we didn't have enough space, so we bought a warehouse. And so we have a warehouse out on Raywood Road that is where our storage operation is now, and our art storage will be there, and production support. So our craft shops are out there too. So, and then we've grown our lifetime members over the last 10 years as well. So. All right, so here are some pictures, milestones along the way. 06-11. So this was in the fundraising drive. We had the Student Union Initiative. Students had, at the union had green t-shirts and this logo, and this is the students marching in the homecoming parade that year. They were repeating what had been done for the fundraising drive in the mid-1920s to raise money for the union. The union was built originally in the mid-1920s, opened in 28. Totally supported by student dollars and alumni support. And so this was the, they were recreating that at the homecoming parade that year. So here's the groundbreaking for Union South, and you see right behind us is the Widmer project going up. So these 2 buildings at that period, if you can think back to that time, really transformed that end of campus, having the new Union South and the new Discovery Center. So, so they were about 6 months ahead of us in their project. So. This is our topping off ceremony for Union South. We found a way to celebrate every milestone in this project about every 6 months. So, this is the tree going up to the top of the building for the topping off ceremony. Here we are 1 year out from opening the new Union South, and so we did a 1 year out campaign on Bascom Hill and handed out construction helmets, and the band was there. We had all these new restaurants we were going to open, and we needed to make sure the students were going to buy the food, right, that we were going to put in these restaurants. So we had all these tastings. Here's one for the ginger root operation. These happened in the months leading up to opening the new Union South. This is a week before we opened, and you see there's no furniture. So everything in this project, I wish I could say we got better with time, and we did not. Everything in this project was always at the last minute, because we'd pick the opening date, and then everything would shift on the construction schedule, and we would stick with the opening date. So, so it still arrived in time, and we opened. And here is an hour before opening. So we're all standing around, getting ready to, it's kind of the last charge to the troops. And here are the 2 students who had the responsibility of installing the terrace chair out on the plaza. So, so they're in the history books now. So, Bucky at the ribbon cutting. Here is a crowd waiting to get in. Students act as if they owned the place from the moment they were there. Everything was just automatically used. The recreation center was full. Students fell asleep on couches, 2 hours after being there. It was really great. It really was. This is the dedication ceremony. Patrick Callan was the student president at the time, so he's dedicating the building in the set. And here's our first Bucky cupcake mural, which has now become a tradition. We do this on Bucky's birthday every year at the closest football game to Bucky's birthday. We do a cupcake mural and give it away out at the tailgate. But this was the very first one. And then some highlights from a memorial. Here's some before shots of the theater wing before we started. So we had to fix this problem with this project. The canopy at the theater would get hit, it'd get repaired, and a week later it'd get hit again. And so that's not happened since we've done this renovation. So I don't know if you remember the old information booth that was out on Park Street. So that's not there anymore. So that's where the loading dock is for the theater wing now. If you remember the old bike circle in front of the Union, but that's now the door, right? We enter the theater wing there now. So. And here's an interior image of the old Union Theater before it was renovated. So here, that was the entrance. We better keep going. This is the new Shannon Lounge on the north side of the theater. Here's the interior of the Union Theater now. New carpeting, new theatrical drape, same shape, same colors otherwise. New seats. Here's the new Mendota Lodge on the lake for hoofers. So this is where all the student clubs can meet, the recreation clubs. This is the new Wheelhouse Studios. This is the pottery studio portion of Wheelhouse Studios. It's in the basement. This is a Hamill Family Browsing Library. This is an example of surprises in the process. So this ceiling was discovered in the renovation. It had been covered over, and so we stopped and redid the design and went back to the original ceiling. So, these were wonderful finds during the renovation. So, here's Memorial Hall. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. Second floor. Here's the new Lake View Lounge, which was the old space for the lake, the cafeteria. Raskeller, I hope it looks the same. This was seemed to be the only room anybody cared about when I would. The tables are still the same. They've been cleaned up. They're a little less sticky. The ceiling is. We went back to a cork ceiling. We always had a cork ceiling, but that is a little bit darker in color. But other than that, it should look very much the same. Great Hall, the plaster's all been repaired in Great Hall, so we're really thrilled with that. And then this was the saddest period in the life of the Union when the terrace was gone for about 8 or 10 months. So even though it was in the winter, it just wasn't the same. So here's a construction photo while the terrace was being redone. And then this is last summer, so all is well again. So, and then 2 shots of Alumni Park, which just opened a couple weeks ago. We're really excited about this new addition between the Union and the Red Gym. And if you haven't been down there yet, you got to come see Bucky. So the new Bucky statue. So, what's next? We are celebrating the designation of the Union being on the National Register of Historic Places on November 10th. So that's happened during this process. We're really proud of that. And so that'll all be celebrated on Friday, November 10th. And then we are rededicating the Gold Star Honor Roll on Veterans Day on November 11th. The Gold Star Honor Roll honors the men and women of UW-Madison who have died in our country's wars and conflicts, and Memorial Union is a war memorial, and so we took this opportunity to update that. It's a beautiful new installation, so please come by and see that too when you have the time. So, all right, and I'm over a little bit, sorry.
Well, congratulations. Union South has been such a success, and we're anxiously awaiting a Memorial Union. But I've got two questions for you. One's an operational and one's a governance. The operational is, how do you intend, these are two fine facilities, how do you intend to both market and allocate events to the two facilities? And the second is, can you just give us a brief explanation about what your governance structure is like?
Sure. So how we market and allocate events to the facility, it really is based on the request of the customer. So unless they don't have a preference, then we'll put them in either building. But it's really based on whether somebody wants Great Hall versus Varsity Hall and those types of things. So we really don't, we're not overly strategic about saying that these are the best events that fit into Varsity Hall and these are the best events that fit into Great Hall, for instance. It's really based on the customer coming forward, whether that's a student organization or a university department or a community group, and requesting the space. So we might be more strategic about that if we had less demand, but we have more demand than we can meet. How we market that, so our own events are what we market. We don't really market other people's events that are in the facilities. We've talked about that, but we haven't really gone there yet. But as far as our own events, I'd say 98% of those are conceived and produced and delivered by the Student Programming Board, Wisconsin Union Directorate. So they make the decisions about those 2,400 union events that are in the facilities. So, and they have their own operating budget, their own marketing. They work with our marketing staff if they want to. But they really are responsible for all of that. So, and make the decisions about that. And they have, I think at last count, over 400, maybe close to 500,000 people came to their events last year. So, so they're pretty good at what they do. So, yeah. So, governance. The union is governed by a union council, which has the exact kind of constituency makeup as the design committee that I shared with you. That's why we use that model for the design committee. So, there's a student president of the union every year. This year it's Ifa Buyan, who's right here, and then there are 5, including students from the union on union council, 4 from the student government, so that gives us 9 student votes. 2 staff members, myself and the deputy director of the union, 2 alumni, 1 faculty member, 1 academic staff member from the campus, and that group meets monthly, and we meet next Wednesday night, I think, yes. So, and they are concerned with policy and philosophical concerns of the union. So I like to say we try to get them to focus on and give us feedback on and approve things like the overall operating budget and whether or not we need another food service operation in the building as opposed to the price of the hamburger, right? So we try to let staff be involved in that kind of stuff, but they would tell us, you need to drive more revenue, right? You need another food operation. Then they'd let the staff kind of figure out which, how to add that, where it would fit best, those types of things. So I hope that answered your question, but yep. So.
Mark, thank you.
Wondering, I'm sorry. Who's first?
Thank you very much for the presentation. What an exciting project. I suspect that there's a good number of UW-Madison alums in this audience. And would you address question of who can make use of these facilities and when?
Sure. So the union is open to students, faculty, and staff at the university, and then union members. So we have 90,000 lifetime union members. About half of those live in Dane County. So I hope many of you that are UW alums are also union members. And so union membership gives you the privilege to do things like purchase beer on the terrace, but also reserve the meeting rooms for your own private use. So if you want to have your birthday party or your anniversary dinner or whatever you might want to do, you could use the meeting rooms for your own use as a union member. So, and then local governmental agencies can use the union as well. Military veterans, because we're a war memorial. So there are other classes, but is that? Lifetime membership. Oh, thank you, Jeff. Lifetime membership. So if you're a graduating student and buy it within 13 months of graduating, it's $100 lifetime. If you are a little bit older than a graduating student and you haven't availed yourself of that, it's more in the $250 to $300 range. I can't quite remember right now, but and that's a one-time payment, but you could pay it off in installments of $50, $55. So, yep.
I was wondering in the terms of, oh, no, gone? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation. It was very enlightening, and I look forward to visiting the terrace. And we also look forward to Mark rejoining our club. Put you on the spot. And I apologize, I hate to do that, but I do want to adjourn on time, and we're 2 minutes over. So we are adjourned.